Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Banolds here with another Practical E-Commerce, building an e-commerce business. Man, I love all my guests, and Brian Goulet is another guest who I've known for a number of years. He is the founder of Goulet Pens, gouletpens.com, where he sells pens and really, like, when I talk with him, the things he talks about are very similar to me. You know, content marketing. He's got an incredible YouTube channel, his blog, social media, as well as being a little more on the conservative side of running his business. And he does some interesting things as well, like works with his wife, which is one thing I could not do. Brian, what else did I forget? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, I just want to say thanks for having me on. You and I met, and I just felt like this instant kind of connection. I was like, yeah, this dude and I are on the same wavelength. And the more that we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of years, that's just been validated more and more. So I'm just really glad to be on your podcast. Hopefully I can bring something unique to your audience. I love doing this kind of stuff, talking about business in general. I'm really big into like business leadership, really big into culture. I spent a lot of time developing the culture on my team. And I work with my wife. We co-founded the company together. We are the sole owners of the company, and we both work in it daily. So I know that usually there's two responses. People are like, kind of like you said, like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Or other people are like, man, that sounds like the greatest thing ever. And I think both are true depending on on you and your spouse. And boy, that is like really tested when you're working with your life partner as well. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here, man. We can cover all kinds of ground. I just love talking about this kind of stuff. So take me anywhere you want to go.
Sounds good. Well, before we dig into it, I should give our listeners a little bit of heads up. We're recording this kind of in the midst of the whole coronavirus COVID-19 deal. So I'm sure we'll kind of touch base on that a little bit, but by the time this gets edited and recorded, I'm sure it's going to be completely different. Some strange times we're living in right now.
For sure, man. I mean, literally, as we're recording this 1 hour ago, they just announced, I'm in Virginia, and our governor just announced they're shutting down schools for the rest of the school year. So my kids are downstairs like doing cartwheels, and my wife and I are sitting here like, how the heck are we going to homeschool on top of trying to run our business and everything? So we're like, all right, we're going to figure all that out. Hopefully we'll have it figured out by the time this broadcast.
I think you'll learn a little bit about like Khan Academy pretty soon. So
yeah, exactly. But anyway, that does contextualize just kind of where we're at. But obviously, we want this to be kind of evergreen. So we don't want that to dominate the entire conversation, but for sure, it's going to color it a little bit.
Now, let's get into a little bit about your business in terms of you guys are selling pens. Are you manufacturing pens? You selling other people's pens? You selling through the channel? 100% e-commerce?
Yeah, 100% e-commerce. I can definitely contextualize things for you. So we sell 100% through our own website, gouletpens.com, which you already mentioned. So this is all really focused on fountain pens. So these are a specific type of pen. It's kind of an old technology. It's been around for about 150 years. And these are the types of pens that you fill up with a water-based ink that comes out of a bottle. If you see like old movies from themed in the 1940s or whatever, it's the kind that you like, somebody's got to fill it and then you carry it around with you and you have to fill it more often. And it's a pretty interesting product. We sell the ink, the paper, and the stuff to go along with it. It's about 4,500 different products that we have in our store. It's all on site. So we don't use a 3PL. We're not a dispersed team or anything. We are right now because of the COVID, but we are on site doing customer service, marketing, fulfillment, inventory operations, all that in one place. Our team's about 35 people strong, and we're just very dedicated, like really super over reliant on content marketing and specifically putting out a ton of educational content about how to use fountain pens. How do you clean them? What makes one pen different from another? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And these are all things that we're buying from established manufacturers. Most of these fountain pens are a fairly technical product, so to manufacture them is actually rather difficult. So we rely more on the people that have been doing that. Some of the manufacturers we have are 100 years old, and they're multi-generational family companies and stuff like that, based in Japan, Germany, Italy, places like that, where fountain pen culture is still very, very strong in those countries. But in the US, it was strong, but it's not so much anymore. So there's a general awareness around fountain pens, or maybe a curiosity, but people don't really know the ins and outs of fountain pens. And that's where we kind of recognize the opportunity to have a lot of content around fountain pens, and then to establish a really reliable supply chain from these other countries to the US. And that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years now. So,
well, you think about in today's environment, what is it, 2020, with the growth of Amazon, that a traditional e-commerce retailer where you're not manufacturing your own product would not be able to exist. I mean, how has the whole Amazon world affected you guys, or have you been able to kind of thrive despite that channel?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla in every e-commerce industry. It has its impact on us too, but what's been interesting is, we've been very aware of Amazon from the absolute beginning of when we started this back really in 2009 is when we started doing the actual fountain pen stuff. But I was making my own pens out of wood, not fountain pens, but just rollerball pens, really high end, like gift pens. I was a woodworker. That's how we kind of got into this whole pen thing, is I basically wanted to be a craftsman. So that very much colors the way that we shaped our whole business, is we had kind of a craftsmanship mentality of, very high touch, very high quality, high level of service, lower volume. So I was never really trying to grow a business that was like scale, sell as much as you can. I was like, no, we're going to be for a little more of a discerning customer. This is a kind of a high barrier to entry for somebody to start using fountain pens. So having really good service and really a lot of education is going to be key, which thankfully that is like some of the weakest things that Amazon offers. These are pens that people who are buying from us, they may already have a collection of 40 fountain pens. If they don't get their other one within 2 hours, that's okay. They're willing to wait an extra day or two to ship from us, but they know that they can answer, have their very weird, specific fountain pen questions answered from people who really, really know the products and really care about them, build and establish kind of rapport. So the best way to compete with Amazon is to not compete with them at all. So we've really doubled down on the things that we know that Amazon really can't offer. And that's what we have built our whole business around. And, it went from my wife and I in 2009, starting out in our dining room and bedroom, to scaling it up to now we have close to a 24,000 square foot facility in Richmond, Virginia. And we have 35 people on our team, and we're supporting all of them based off of our one sales channel of our website. So I consider that to be a smashing success and bigger than anything I could have ever dreamed in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's killer, man. That's totally boss, man. A couple things I want to touch base on is, what was the decision to bring it all in-house in terms of like 3PL? And touch base on that first.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that it was strategic on our part to do so, but quite honestly, part of it was ignorance and part of it was we really didn't have a choice. When we started out, I was already selling my own handmade wood pens, which I had no reliable enough supply or customer base to even consider a 3PL. So it was like, okay, well, we can just ship these through the US mail out of our house, relatively straightforward. So that's kind of how it was. And then we started selling a few more products that other people made. And it was like, okay, well, I'll just get more boxes and more bubble wrap and we'll just ship, we'll move it to our garage. So, kind of fundamentally, it started out in the beginning of just practicality. We had basically no money whatsoever. I think we had like $2,000 to start the business, so it was like, well, it's not even, I can't even get anybody on the phone for that little money. That was to buy inventory. That was to buy computers, everything. So really it was purely out of practicality. Of course, that's why we did content marketing too, is I had no money for ads. It wasn't even in the conversation. So I was like, all right, what can we do with basically no money and only time? And by the way, our son, who's now 10, was basically being born in this process. So throw a mortgage and a new child on top of that. And, it gets really clarifying real quick what your options are, which is limited, but it allowed us to really spend a lot of time. Again, I was a craftsman. And so I took a craftsmanship mentality around the way that we pack and ship our products. I took a craftsman's approach towards how we market our products. It's very heavy education, wanted to put a lot of personality into it. So that's why I've been the main person behind our videos, as you have for your channel. I've been the main person behind that, for 10 years now, and kind of still am. So for me, a lot of it was just starting out with what's practical and just pure passion and doing what made sense at the time. And then as we've scaled it, so much of our personality behind the business has been shaped by kind of our origin story. We've looked at 3PLs, but I was like, there's just so many advantages to having it in-house where that's continued to make sense for us. So that's why we do it that way.
Yeah, especially after you've already built it out, it feels like you've got that infrastructure to be able to handle it. Your story, it almost sounds like you're echoing my exact story. We started with $30 and YouTube.
Right.
And, it's just kind of, I found out my wife was pregnant about 2 weeks after Beard Brand started. So
nice.
It's great hearing your story. I really connect with it. But
yeah,
was there a strategy behind YouTube, or was it just like, I got to do something, I'm going to make a video?
Yeah, there was definitely a strategy behind, not so much a strategy. I started making YouTube videos in 2010. Literally the first video I posted was 10 days before my son was born. So, boy, you want to talk about timing. But a lot of it was shaped, I got to give credit to Gary Vaynerchuk, because he wrote a book called Crush It. That was his first marketing book he wrote. He's written 5 now. And of course, he has a social media agency of about 1,000 people in New York City now. But it was very much an unproven concept, kind of, when he was, or not a mainstream concept. It was proven, but it was not mainstream, this idea of content marketing. So in 2010, it was really, or 2009, when I read his book and was planning for all this, it was really something that required a little bit of foresight. So I liked the idea of blogging. I liked the idea of education and kind of being a subject matter expert, and then pairing that with selling products. I saw the potential of that for the fountain pen community because no one was really doing that. There were established retailers, but a lot of them were like brick and mortar stores in major metropolitan areas that had established clientele and had, basically been working for decades in the industry. So I saw an opportunity to take it online and to pair it with content marketing. I knew that video was going to be a really good way for me personally, just because I had the right acumen and the right personality for it. And the products themselves are very visual. So it lended itself well to photography and video specifically. And I saw it honestly as a way to really build a personal connection. You think about if you go to like a brick and mortar store, especially for a niche product like fountain pens. If you go to like a stationery store in a small town, if they even exist anymore, you're going to talk with the owners. They're going to really be passionate, have deep knowledge of the products. You're going to feel connected to that person who's kind of the proprietor of the store. I saw an opportunity to use YouTube and to use video production as a way for people to still have that same connection, but I don't have to individually talk to every single person and say the same thing over and over again with each person that walks into the store. They can basically sit in the comfort of their home or on their phone as they're commuting to work or as they're working out or whatever, and they can learn about this stuff, see my face, connect with me, and then obviously I'm introducing them to this beautiful fountain pen world. And then when it comes time to shop, they're going to feel really loyal and really personally connected because I've invested so much time and I've really been there for them walking in this process. And so I'm going to be top of mind, and my company will be top of mind when it is time for them to look at fountain pen supplies. So that was the vision from the very beginning. And here we are 1,700 videos later. And that has absolutely very much been proven to be a successful platform for us and for our company's DNA. And that's not just like, well, it's because we got in on it early. It's been a 10-year slow build. And as I'm sure it's like, yeah, you might get lucky and get a video here and there that kind of goes viral and gets you some attention. But largely, it's pretty much like anything else. It's a job and you got to work at it, and it builds over a long period of time. And that's really been our story, and it's been proven very successful for us.
Yeah, you talk about the grind. I think what's interesting about this is, you've done 1,700 videos, but you've got 4,500 SKUs. So you got some work to do, man.
I know, right? Like you think about specifically with fountain pens, this is why I saw the unlimited potential for content marketing. I was like, I could put out a video on every single product we sell and basically never have enough. Not to mention the products that we sell interact with each other. You fill a pen with a specific type of ink. You use it on a specific type of paper. I think at some point a couple of years ago, I calculated the possible number of calculations of different combinations you could do. And it was something that was so insanely infinite. I was like, well, this is an unlimited potential for content. So this is a pretty good place to go in terms of never running out of things to talk about.
Yeah, and super long tail as well. Like that's where you're going to be able to get your conversions and kind of the bottom of funnel stuff where you get very specific with who you're talking with and the needs that you're serving them.
Yeah.
When we were in San Antonio a couple months ago for the e-commerce Fuel Live conference, we had a really good conversation about leadership. And one of the key takeaways that you shared with me that is kind of one of your staples is no one should be surprised as to the outcome of working at your company. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really ascribe to the notion that to be unclear is to be unkind as a leader. Basically, there's only 3 reasons why someone in your company is not successful at their job. One is because they're having personal issues, stuff that you just can't control. Another one is that they have some level of incompetence. They're just not capable of doing the job. But the last one, and the one that happens a lot, is leadership failure. You can pretty much boil everything down to one of those 3 things, or maybe a combination of all 3. But the leadership failure, that would be they should have never been hired in the first place, that the position you were hiring for was not made clear, and you could have hired maybe the right person, but not to do the right work that needed to be done. It could be that they were hired and they were the right person, the right fit, but they were not given proper training or instruction or direction. They weren't managed well, and the relationship maybe could have broken down over time. Or maybe it was a great fit 2 years ago, but context has changed. Maybe your business has changed or their life has changed. Their goals are different than the company's goals, and you have not gotten in sync on that. So there's so many different things that can happen that I think especially small businesses, entrepreneurs who just things are changing rapidly. You got a small team. It seems just really overwhelming because you don't have a really long established, kind of culture or long established positions in the company. So it's really easy for things to break down and for it to be so clear in your head, but not clear with the people that you've hired. That happens all the time. I've done it myself so many times, and it still happens. But the thing that is most within your control when you're trying to get to the root of someone's issue, if you just feel like they're not working out, is looking at yourself as the leader. Okay, have I really been clear about what they're supposed to be doing, or maybe where they've fallen short? Are my expectations correct? Are their expectations correct? So it requires having a lot of engagement and conversation with them and really, really, really digging to what the root of the issue is and then being very clear. So if you get to the root of that issue and you have a conversation, you're like, wow, okay, we really are not on the same page here. Then coming up with a plan, a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, whatever is needed, and say, we got to get back on track here because this just isn't working. That gives them an opportunity to be really clear and kind of get back on track. Or maybe you just haven't clarified things correctly, but then you are clarifying things by getting them back on track. Call it a performance improvement plan or, whatever it may be. But that's the basic idea of it is, okay, we've gotten to the point where we've had a conversation. We know that there's been failure here. You might need to recognize with them, there's been a leadership failure here, and I'm going to fix that. I just went through this. Literally, Eric, since the last time we talked, I had to go through this with 3 different members of my team. 3 different members where there was major leadership failure, lack of communication, and then there was some stuff on the team member side that was really not great that was going on that I kind of discovered through the process of digging in that we had to get clear on too. And ultimately it resulted in me losing 3 different members of my team. But throughout the whole process, clarity was achieved. Everyone agreed where the breakdowns were. And it came to the point where, okay, we realized that there isn't a relationship here to continue moving forward. And I was able to achieve a mutual agreement on all three of their parts about the fact that this relationship wasn't working anymore. And we were able to come up with a plan to have it work better for both sides. So as a leader, if you can achieve that level of clarity, it may not mean that they stay around, or it may mean, because I know, you've had your own stuff that we talked about that I won't speak on because I'll let you, it's your situation, but you may have a situation where you get that clarity and it's like, okay, somebody might step up and get back on track. I've had that happen too. So really, clarity is the ultimate goal. And before I turn it back over to you, because I just really have a lot to talk about here.
No. I mean, let's kind of like, I feel like, one of the challenges of being a leader is, you have your own role, you have your own job, you're creating videos, you're, setting the vision for the company, you're meeting with team members, but you really don't know everything that your team is doing, because there's a likelihood that your team is doing things. They just aren't focused on the right thing, or
you hope they're doing things.
Right. You hope they, I'm kind of a trust is one of our core values. So, I inherently trust people, and if they say they're doing things, then I believe them. But, kind of like, how do you make sure that your metrics are in line with their efforts? And we've really struggled with, like project management, where there aren't like key metrics that you can keep an eye on a daily basis to see if things are going well or not going well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, you can just imagine we have 35 or so people. I think we have 19 or 20 different positions out of those 35. So it's like, how do you define all these different positions that are honestly changing constantly? And then how do you put metrics to all of them that are clear on both sides, that if people are meeting or not meeting them? This is something that I think especially founders really fight and resist, myself included, because it's exciting. You want to build something, and it feels like when you're just dealing with metrics and tracking and checking in and course correcting, that feels like, I'm not actually getting anything done here. I'm looking at numbers and having meetings all day long, and it's not actually moving me forward. I mean, that is something that I inherently fight with, because I'm much more the kind of natural entrepreneur, more so than a natural manager. But it's been something over 10 years that I've come to rely on heavily, as this is actually a very helpful way to make sure you are actually getting things done and getting the right things done. Because without proper tools to be able to verify that someone is being successful in their role, you're just kind of leaving it up to fate to decide if that actually happens. And more often than not, people are getting unclear the further along you go. And, I know your team is more, I'll call it more of a flat organization, where you're kind of more directly managing everyone because you got a slightly smaller team than I do. But when it gets to the point where you have other leaders who are leading people, basically it becomes like that game of telephone where it gets even more unclear what people are actually doing the bigger you get. That's why larger organizations, everything is metric driven. It is difficult and it is a challenge, but it's basically you either embrace that and spend a disproportionate amount of time trying to get that clarity in place, or eventually it's going to catch up with you and it's going to be unclear and kind of blow up in your face. So I think you have to focus on clarity and metrics the bigger you get.
Are your team members coming up with the metrics to track, or are you kind of directing them to the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm like the David Marquette turn the ship around type of mentality of you provide provide authority to the information instead of information to the authority, if that makes sense. So I'm all for like trying to put the onus on the team members, because they're the ones doing the work day in and day out. Get them to think about what is the most important metrics and all that. But the final say has to be from you as the leader, because more often than not, somebody might have like, hey, this is the most important metric. You'd be like, I can see that because you're spending a lot of time there, or you're very personally passionate about that. But that's not actually what's driving to the best outcome for the whole organization. So the clearer the picture you can paint for the company's goals, the metrics that you're tracking as a company, if they understand really well how what they're doing plugs into that, then the metrics that they're going to come up with are going to be much closer aligned to what actually makes a difference. You may have to have a heavy hand in painting that bigger picture for them in order to make that kind of meeting in the middle connection. So I think it's very much like a partnership that you have to have with them. But I always like to serve it out there, paint a picture for what it needs to look like, and then see what they come up with. Because you might be surprised. They might come up with some really interesting and creative things that you wouldn't have thought of, but they definitely will need to spend some time with you on understanding the bigger picture for that really to be effective.
Yeah. What are you doing for metrics for project management? So what are some things that you found works for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the team. So basically the structure that we have a couple different layers. So we have an executive, call it an executive team, consists of me, my wife, Rachel, basically our COO. I'm the CEO. We have an HR director and then a director of operations. So we have a broader leadership team, which includes all of our team managers. So we have a manager for our customer relations or customer service. We have one for marketing. We have one for our inventory and production. And then we have one for fulfillment. So, and then we have a couple of supervisors and stuff. So that broader leadership team, basically anyone who is responsible for other people is on that broader leadership team. And so we're in constant communication with that broader leadership team. And then we have all of our team members that are on each team. So it's a pretty good structure for the size that we're at. It's something that we've built up over time. But the way that we basically structure our metrics is we have scorecards for each team and then one for the company as a whole. So we look at, it's on the balanced scorecard approach. If you've never heard of that, just Google balanced scorecard. We came up with our own custom one. But that idea basically is you're not just looking at financials or just looking at output. You're also looking at people and the people side of things, and as well as customer satisfaction and things like that. But the idea is that you have some kind of numerical metric, even if it's a qualitative thing, like are people happy in their jobs? We have some way to measure or metricize that, even if it's a qualitative thing, so that we can keep track of it on a regular basis. So we have this company balance scorecard, which we adjust basically on an annual basis, but we at least check in with it on a quarterly basis. And then all of the teams have their own scorecards, which is going to be like a little more granular, right, based on what they're doing. So like customer satisfaction is going to be something that's tied much more to our customer relations team. Our conversion rate or maybe our audience size is going to be something that matters much more to our marketing team. Our turnaround time for shipping or the rate of defective shipping is going to be something that our fulfillment team pays a lot more attention to. Our in-stock percentage of key products or stuff like that is going to be something, our turn rate. That's going to be something that our inventory team is going to pay more attention to. So all of that feeds into the high-level company stuff, but each team is focused on their own metrics. And then the individual players on that team is going to be able to drill down really to like one or two key metrics that their role ties into those team scorecards. So the idea is it should really cascade up and down so that there's clarity through the whole organization as to basically, can someone sit down every single day and say, okay, I know what I'm doing is going to matter towards these initiatives that's going to feed into the company as a whole. And if they can see that their daily efforts are tying directly to the company's goals, I mean, that's the dream right there. And you've really achieved something great. So that's something we've been working on. And it really takes a solid year or two to get that in place and really get cranking, and has to constantly be adjusted and updated. But when you have that in place, it provides so much clarity for people every day. And then they have freedom within kind of their daily work and how they achieve those goals. That's where the freedom and the autonomy in their role comes in. But in terms of the accountability and what really matters, that's really kind of got to come from leadership and the directives of the company and its goals that are kind of constantly updating.
Yeah, you kind of talked about constantly working on it over a year to get it to the goal. What does that mean in terms of actual manager and team member meetings? Is this like a monthly thing, a daily thing, a quarterly thing? How frequently are they getting the guidance on what they're doing, their performance, and how they can improve or not improve their activities?
Absolutely. I think it's going to depend on the size of the organization. It's going to depend on your rate of growth, right? So if you're growing at 100%, that is going to feel very different. And the frequency at which you need to change that stuff is going to be different than if you're growing 4% a year, right? If you have 10,000 people in your organization, it's going to be different than if you have a team of 4. So I think that what the right answer is, you want to have no more structure and no more frequency than is required, but you want to have enough so that there's clarity. And that's going to look different for everybody. But I think at a minimum, having a 1 or 2 day annual planning meeting for your senior leadership, and then having maybe a 1 day or at least a half day quarterly revisitation of that annual planning is essential from a leadership standpoint. And then I really like the idea of having weekly meetings for the company, maybe as a whole, or maybe every other week, and then certainly having team meetings once a week where the whole team is contextualizing what's happening every week. And then I like the idea of having daily stand-up meetings, 5 or 10-minute meetings for your leadership, and then if you can for each team. For us, that schedule works really well because we're constantly launching new products, maybe 150 SKUs or so a month. So there's a lot of new product information, what shipments are coming in, what's getting marketed that day. Daily stand-ups or huddles or whatever you want to call them are like really essential for us because there's a lot of information flowing. So that helps for us to meet. We meet at 8:45 every morning as a broader leadership team. So it's like 9 or 10 of us that are meeting. We're talking about what shipments are coming in that day, what's being planned to market, what events are going on that day that could impact what needs to happen for that day. Then we might meet once a week to talk slightly higher level, maybe at the 10,000 foot level instead of like on the runway, if we're going with an airplane metaphor here. And then the quarterly meetings would be more like the 30,000 square foot level. And then the annual ones would be like 50,000 foot level. Yeah. So the key is just to have clarity and context around what these meetings are, what they're for. The thing that doesn't work is if you just have like a weekly staff meeting and everything gets thrown into one huge meeting. And then there's strategic stuff getting mixed in with like things that need to be solved within the next 2 hours. So contextualizing what each meeting is for is super important. And then you can play around with how often you need to have which ones based on your specific business. But a lot of this came out of, EOS, the whole traction, the book Traction, all that's really helpful. Anyone who's running a small team, especially like an e-com or something, that is super helpful. I honestly probably would have built specifically around that model had I discovered that first, but I only discovered it like 3 years ago. And I already had a pretty decent system in place, but that does still line up with what we do at Goulet Pens. There's another book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, which is super helpful. That's where a lot of where I've gained that. But Patrick Lencioni and Vern Harnish, which are where these two different kind of schools of thought came from, they really align pretty closely. So you could just pick one and go either way. But yeah, The Advantage has been really helpful. And specifically the book Death by Meeting, which feeds into his book, The Advantage. He wrote Death by Meeting first, Patrick did. But Death by Meeting is really, if you're specifically talking about meeting structure, that's a really good book to read. It's not a burdensome read, and it gave me a ton of clarity, and that's largely what we built our meeting structure on.
Man, that's some good insight, and I think we could probably chat for another like 2 or 3 hours because again, like you're just echoing what we're trying to do here at Beard Brand. What's the best thing for our listeners to do? Should they follow your YouTube channel, visit your website, buy some products?
Yeah, obviously buying is great, but I mean, if you're into fountain pens, that's great. If you're not, try them, but by all means, I'm not doing this podcast to try to sell stuff. I really love just talking about entrepreneurship, e-commerce, small business. I would just talk about this basically all day long for no pay if I could.
Are you on Twitter or social media or personally?
Yeah, personally, I have a Twitter account. I don't use it as much. I'm on Instagram. So brian.goulet on Instagram. Goulet Pens is the Instagram handle. So you could just reach out through our company accounts too. We have a YouTube channel, Goulet Pen Company on YouTube.
And your last name is spelled Goulet.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And in case people are wondering, Robert Goulet is my 7th cousin once removed, because I've been getting asked that basically my whole life. So if you're curious about Robert Goulet, he was a big Broadway singer and actor and stuff like that. But yeah, we are related, and I also sing. I'm a tenor too, in case you're curious. So I do kind of sound like him when I sing, but I'm not going to sing today.
All right. I'll have to watch those videos to see some of your singing, I'm sure, right?
I don't sing a lot in the videos. I probably could a little bit more.
Yeah, you should drop a little singing intro or outro. That'd be a lot of fun.
There you go. Do some Man of La Mancha or Lancelot or something that Robert Goulet was known for back in the day.
Sweet, man. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been another Building an E-commerce Business. I'm your host, Eric Banholtz, representing Practical E-commerce. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers. and keep on growing.
Thanks, everyone.